So my name's Rowan. I'm one of the senior project advisors at Community-Led Housing London. To introduce this series is a series of 6 events happening over 3 days. We're on the second day. And it's really capturing the activities that are taking place all over London as people are coming together to take a leading and lasting role in delivering affordable and sustainable homes. So this series discusses how the principles underpinning the growing community-led housing movement can be delivered at scale across London and the UK. Now, more than just a housing typology and or a design concept, community-led housing is about resident control and comes in all shapes and sizes, from community land trusts and co-housing to housing co-ops and tenant management organisations. So this series then is about showcasing the exciting ways communities are partnering with industry to take control of the decisions that matter to them, and delivering viable housing models that are publicly supported in the process. And this morning's session on housing associations is no exception. As you may know, many housing associations began life as communities taking action over their housing situations. Now, with a wealth of experience in housing delivery and management, we've been asking how they can use their skills and capacities to help today's communities to do the same. And importantly, what are the incentives for them to do so? These are questions that we've been exploring through our work at CLH London, but to help us get into the nuts and bolts of how these partnerships can work in practice, we have an exciting panel joining us today made up of 2 community housing groups who will be presenting their ideas to 3 of London's major housing associations, who will be sharing their knowledge and experience of how the sector can be supporting projects, both on the delivery side and in terms of long-term management and ownership. So to chair the discussion and to share her own extensive experience on this topic, I'd like to introduce Linda Wallace, CEO of CDS Cooperatives. Linda has joined as a chief executive in 2013. She's worked in the housing sector for over 35 years and has a strong background in business development, asset management and customer services. She's held a variety of roles at director level in small and large housing associations and in the private rented sector. And Linda, over to you.
Thanks, Rowan. I think that's code for I am very old, and I have been around for a very long time. So welcome everyone. It's amazing to see 54 people already joined us on the session. I think this question of how housing associations can work with community-led housing groups has been sort of something we've been tussling with for a while. And one of the things we hope from this session is that we'll get some sort of practical understanding of why would we, and also what gets in the way so that we can start to address those barriers. Just a quick intro about CDS. So we started life as a secondary housing co-op. So our sort of core purpose was really to help small cooperative landlords to operate independently. We still do a lot of that. So we work with about 2,000 tenants who live in small independent housing co-ops. But somewhere along the way, we also became a registered provider. So we're a landlord in our own right. And in total, we manage about 3,000 homes across South East England. And our core kind of essence, I suppose, of CDS is trying to find what it means to be an enabler. So trying to help other people to achieve their goals through the work that we do. So very much in step with the community-led housing approach. We host the Community-Led Housing Hub with the GLA, and we're trying to work out what our place on the stage is in this as well. So I'm excited to hear from the 2 groups and to hear more about their projects. I'm going to hand over to Abby Jacobs from L&Q, who's going to just introduce herself and say a little bit about her background. Hi, Abby.
Hi, thank you, Linda. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you this morning. Thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know who L&Q is London and Quadrant Housing Association. It was started 57 years ago by a group of 32 young professionals who came together with a dream of ending homelessness. With an initial investment of £2 each, they bought their first home. Today, the £64 has become £12 billion social business, and we have over 100,000 homes. So who is Build London Partnership? I lead the Build London Partnership team for L&Q. This is an initiative between the GLA and L&Q to help smaller housing associations with developing new homes in London, particularly in London. We started with 9 BME partners, but we now have 43 partners. And I've extended from the BME partners to community-led housing groups, co-housing, co-ops, and a couple of charities as well. So we were able to negotiate an enhanced grant for affordable homes with the GLA, which I can talk to you a bit more during the question time. We have a dedicated in-house team, and I lead a team of 11 to deliver this. But more importantly, we've got the back office support of over 250 staff, development staff in L&Q, which means that we're able to offer advice and signpost even if we don't work with you. The whole ethos of this is to help the smalls. We typically deal with smaller sites. So my colleagues in the mainstream, their target is 10,000 homes a year. Ours obviously is less than that. Our target is 600 by March 2022. We use small sites, infill sites, nooks and crannies of London that are unloved, and we turn them into beautiful homes that people are proud to live in. We build capacity for our partners as well. So you don't have to work with us, but whatever, we will share our experiences and our knowledge with you. And we provide awareness basically for this initiative. There are 4 procurement routes, and as I go down the list, you get more flexibility. So if you were interested in off-the-shelf scheme or Section 106 to start just to get yourself on the development kind of ladder, or a package deal, or land opportunities such as using TFL small sites, or you've got land of your own, the flexibility kind of increases as you go down that list. So we can look at different procurement routes for you. And that's me in a nutshell. I look forward to answering some more questions in due course. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. I'll hand over now to Heather Thomas from Saphire Housing.
Good morning. Thank you, Linda. Like both Linda and Abby, I've worked in housing for many years. I'm currently Chief Executive of Saphire Independent Housing, and I'll say a little bit more about Saphire in a moment. But in terms of my housing career, I've worked for both local authorities and housing associations and a TMO, and I'm currently chair of Croydon Churches Housing Association in South London. I'll just say a little bit about Saphire and its journey, which might have some relevance, hopefully, to the discussion today. I'm going to try sharing my screen. So, yes, I'm really pleased to be speaking today. Just a little bit about Saphire, as I was saying. So Saphire was originally formed in 1969. It was formerly Irish Centre Housing. And it actually got its first property in 1974. And like most or many housing associations, it was formed at a time to meet a particular housing need. At that time, it was formed to meet the need of Irish people who'd moved to London and were facing discrimination in finding housing and indeed services. And it actually started off firstly as an advice centre and then moved into providing housing. As I say, it got its first property in 1974. Since then, we've evolved. We are still regarded as a smaller housing association. We've got 273 homes. We do have a USP, which is particularly around focusing on the needs of single people, and that goes back to our roots of providing housing and services to Irish people who were facing discrimination. So that kind of single person aspect of it still comes through in our service delivery. Having said that, we do also have general needs homes and hostels, and we work in the London boroughs of Brent, Camden, Hertsmere and Islington, and hopefully soon in Hounslow, because we are going to start developing some new homes in Hounslow after many, many years of not doing any development. So I can talk to you a little bit about what that journey's been like. And I should say as well, we rebranded as Saphire in 2015 to meet the changing housing needs in London, the diversity of the housing needs in London. So as we know, London is an incredibly diverse city. So the housing needs of people in London have changed quite a bit, and who needs affordable housing has also changed. And Saphire therefore changed its name to really reflect that. We've got a turnover of about £4 million. Our housing property is worth about £60 million as well. And we are quite an active member of the G320 group of smaller housing associations based in London and South East, because I think it's important to kind of work together with other housing associations of a similar size to us, or bigger or smaller, in terms of generally raising the profile of social housing.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Heather. We're going to move into the sessions in a moment, where we're going to have both of our community-led housing groups putting forward their pitch for how their schemes could work with housing associations. We're going to start with Sanya from Northwest 3 Community Land Trust, which I think is North London's first community land trust. Is that right, Sanya?
That's right.
So yeah, over to you to tell people more about your scheme.
Thank you. Well, having put down the ages of L&Q and Saphire start, I thought we were really old, but actually we're really young. So I'm a co-founder of NW3CLT, a community land trust. We are a community benefit society, and our USP, our mission, we're still in a fighting mode, is to provide affordable housing in high value areas for our local squeezed middle. So that's a really hard job in hand. We registered with the National CLT Network in December 2015 and incorporated and registered with FCA and HMRC in April 2016. We have about 150 members, and about 10% of us are incredibly regular and active in everything we do. We organized into 5 subcommittees and have a 5-person board. And perhaps uncharacteristically for an urban CLT, our board skill set is particularly well suited, we think, to a job in hand in developing and finding new modes and reading through existing frameworks and trying to modify them. We were recently referred to by a local councillor, cabinet member for investing in communities, culture and inclusive economy as a community-led developer. Well, I thought that was an oxymoron, really, but it seems that it was actually a vote of confidence in our abilities. Our core group really includes engineers, architects, sustainability consultants, housing specialists, finance professionals, and management consultants. So I think we're probably better equipped than most developers to do things well. A few words about our development. It's a local council-owned site. It was previously occupied by 11 housing units, 3 of which were social rented, and the others were leaseholds bought under the voluntary right to buy over the last 20 years. The site burned down exactly 3 years to this month ago, 3 years ago to this month, and it had been shored up and left to further decay ever since. Tragically, 1 resident died in the fire, and in spring 2018, the council was rebuked for the lack of maintenance of fire alarms in order to review its safety procedure borough-wide. And in summer 2018, we started campaigning. We really wanted to test locally the appetite of the neighbourhood for an alternative future for this site. In other words, something that isn't a market sale to the highest bidder, which has been the case in our area, being the high value. And needless to say, we met with a resounding approval and success, and we gained about 30 new members just on the back of the campaign. And feeling really chirpish, we put together a bid and applied to a CLH for a grant to help us put together a business plan. And we got the grant, and with that, for a year, we laboured and delivered to the council a business plan which was well supported by a viability tool, which we funded the production of from the CLH fund. And again, in November last year, the council officers and the politicians in the meeting that we were presenting said, bought. And we thought this was a great one-word endorsement of our hard work. So they thought it was a great idea, and they thought they were in with us. We proposed a replacement on the same site, a replacement building of 18 mixed tenure units. We wanted to re-provide the 3 social rents and cross-subsidize them with 3 market sale. And the remaining 12 units in the mix would be an intermediate mix of rental ownership and part ownership. And I think crucially, we offered a very healthy receipt to the council as well. On the strength of that success, CLH funded us to take more in-house studies and designs, and enables us to engage in a pre-planning consultation with the council, which they offered free of charge, which we thought it was amazing. So, I mean, everything is positive. We kind of waiting. Well, I'll tell you, we did have a few hiccups, which are coming. So the council's planning was incredibly positive, and it was more ambitious in a way than our proposal. The funding we got to the second stage funding also enabled us to appoint project managers from Altair, and they are at the moment helping us interview 4 architecture practices that are pitching to take the proposal forward. 2 months ago, the council cabinet meeting voted unanimously that the disposal of the site be to a CLT, Community Land Trust, and we are expecting to partake in a formal expression of interest in a couple of weeks' time. I'll say a few words about procurement. We decided really early on, well before we had a developer title bestowed on us, that subject to winning this site, we want to remain closely involved in all stages of this development. We felt with our unique skill set, we believe that this will be just the first of many developments we undertake, and we therefore want to remain in the driving seat up to the construction completion on site. Our financial model is a combination of bank finance, grants and community shares, and this is where housing associations come in. So as soon as we started campaigning back in 2018, we also reached out to a local housing association. We had a first couple meetings that we both thought went very well, and we both thought would be a good future and a good fit. But unfortunately, the housing association in question is part of a bigger partnership. And eventually its board decided that the only thing they could offer us would be a friendly mentorship. I'm sorry, I'll just get rid of this. This was nice, but it wasn't what we needed to hear. So having debated about registering as a registered provider ourselves, we decided against it on the grounds of the system being ill-suited for a small operation like ours. So finding a partnering RP was always pretty high on our list. We knew a housing association had an important role to play in accessing government grants on our behalf. We also know when it comes to management of units, this being our first development, we want to look to a housing association in order to undertake this task on our behalf. And our affordability allocation subcommittee at the moment is working on rationalizing the originally planned 6 tenures across 18 units to 4 or fewer, in order to make our case more appealing to a partnering housing association. So this is the conundrum in hand we have.
Thank you, Sanya. Just to clarify then, so the key things that you would say you want from a housing association, could you just summarise those for us?
So the key things are helping accessing the housing, the grants for the affordable units we're including, which is all apart from 3. And management of the units once they come through.
Okay.
And really, I mean, you know, healthy mentoring is always wonderful, and learning from the older guys who've been around for much longer. But we do want to do we don't want a delivery partner. That's we don't, you know, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's really, I think that's a common pattern, is that people are very clear that they want to be in control of the development process, because a lot of the key things that can't be changed later happen there. And I wondered whether one of your ambitions was to manage the units yourself in future, that was also transitional.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we, you know, having worked with a group of 15 people or 20, depends on time, who are all but a handful are really invested with a vested interest that they need a home. We've really created a community, and so, you know, we are all learning how to get on well, how to put in the amount of work that's necessary, and we want that to translate into, down the line, co-living and managing the units. But you know, none of the members have had that experience as yet, and so we want somebody to show us how to do it well. And in addition, because we have the 3 social rental, which we have to have managed by an RP either way.
That's
so
great.
Yes, long term we'd like to do it ourselves, but short term we're very much on a learning curve.
That's a brilliant first introduction to a project for people who haven't talked through one before. It's quite a journey. I think there's lots of echoes of other people's experience will come through in that. Rowan's beautifully reminded me that we've had lots of new people join since we started. So just to remind people to put any questions into the Q&A so we can pick those up at the end of the presentations and the presenters' questions. I'm going to hand over to Lorraine and Stella now, who are from the Heads Together Co-op. You're both able to take your mutes off.
Thank you very much, Linda. Rowan, are you going to be sharing the slides on that side, please, on your side for us? Yeah. Okay.
Aaron, can you do that?
Okay, lovely. Go now.
Over to you, Lorraine.
Can you all hear me? Yeah, can you hear me now?
Very clearly, Lorraine, thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come and, you know, just share what Heads Together is all about, and just to, you know, find out the opportunities that we can tap into to partner with a housing association. My name is Lorraine Podiephatshwa. I live in Croydon. I'm a single parent. I work full-time, and my background is education, health and social care, and training, community engagement and development. And currently I work for NHS as a social prescribing link worker. So I basically came across community-led housing in 2017 when I was homeless and in temporary accommodation. I was actually looking for a housing association to self-refer. That's when I came across community-led housing, and I was quite intrigued just to find out about it, to explore it, and ended up taking all the researches and talking to local residents, and now we formed a group of over 30 members. So with Stella here, who will be sharing just to tell you about Heads Together. So just to introduce ourselves, Heads Together is a housing cooperative. It is a community-led housing group composed of low-income families and individuals who live and work in Croydon. It was founded in 2018. Basically, our motivation came from our frustration, really, because we live it. We understand how painful it is to live in temporary accommodation. We are just tired of things being done to us and for us, And we are coming forward to say, here we are as the community living that life. Give us the opportunity to work with you, to bring in your different expertise. We bring our own community development and engagement and experience and just complete the puzzle. So we have that passion to help ourselves and to support other families to break free from the homelessness cycle and to begin our journey to recovery and independence. Next slide. Okay, so basically our vision, we have a quite interesting vision to raise our families in a stable environment that will enhance the well-being of our members and also reduce the dependence on the system, because most of the single parents, especially, we are known of relying on the system. So we want to be able to provide a resident-led housing that is genuinely affordable and of high quality, because our experience is that we just get thrown in properties, dilapidated properties, properties that are in poor condition. So we really want to be able to bring that standard that will improve the well-being of our families. And these are our main objectives, is to provide affordable housing, which is equivalent to the rent standard for social rent housing in London, in the London Borough of Croydon, to allow our members to dwell long-term through secure tenures, instead of you being moved from one temporary accommodation to another. There's just no security in the current accommodation that we live in. And to be able to create a supportive community environment through shared activities and facilities, such as the food hub that you can see on that picture. And this food hub was birthed during this COVID-19, because we had loads of families who were not classified as extremely vulnerable, and these families do not qualify for food parcel. So we had to think on our feet, and we're looking at our members and the other residents in the areas that we live. So we had to think on our feet really fast and come up with this community food hub, which is a very big success. So yeah. And with regards to the legal structure for Heads Together, we are a fully mutual housing cooperative run by a duly elected committee, which is accountable to its members. And we oversee the smooth running of Heads Together. Next slide, please. Just to share some of the stories from our members. The first story is, all I want is my daughter to be brought up in a safe, stable environment where she has space to move around within a warm and comfortable, homely environment. Firstly, my biggest fear is for the council to move us anytime to another accommodation, temporary accommodation, especially out of the area. Then the second statement says, the accommodation I received was not only temporary and unsafe, it was also despicable, given the school conditions, antisocial behavior, and overall depressing atmosphere which came with it. Being the mother of a fast-growing daughter who I have had to support on my own, I was keen to learn more about community-led housing. Yes, so those are some of the stories. We have got loads of stories. We just picked those two. So we've done our research in terms of the situation with homelessness in Croydon. According to our research, these are some, sorry, hold on. Yeah, according to our research, there are 5,000 households on the Croydon Housing Register with a waiting period of over 10 years. Almost 2,000 people applied to the council as homeless each year. Only 260 council properties became available last year for people on Croydon waiting list. Since December 2016, 866 households were living in temporary accommodation with a waiting period of up to 2 years if they do not find an alternative accommodation for themselves. And we know the challenge of finding alternative accommodations. We get pushed to look into private, which is quite expensive, and also being given options outside the borough. So it's quite challenging. The latest trends show that of the households accepted as homeless in Croydon, around 50% are from Black minority ethnic backgrounds. And over the years, by far, the highest proportion of accepted homeless households in Croydon have been made up of lone parents with dependent children. Hence, we came up with Heads Together, which will be housing single parents with dependents. And we'll just try to highlight some of the issues that our members experience. These are the real issues that our members experience. Some of them are unaffordable rent in private and housing associations. In the past, we used to know that housing association is affordable, but it doesn't seem to be the case nowadays. Living in cramped space and overcrowding, bad living conditions which affect our health, being forced to move outside Croydon. We have got some of our members who live in Kingston and they are keen to come back to Croydon because this is where their support network is. And we are being long waiting in temporary accommodation. That cycle of poverty and homelessness, because some of the families, they keep on moving from one temporary accommodation to another. They accumulate rent arrears. And after that, they end up being moved from that accommodation. So it creates that cycle of poverty and that cycle of homelessness. We also have some of the members who are being forced to cohabit in abusive relationships. The council tax and the rent and other debts due to moving from one temporary accommodation to another, and the tenure insecurity, which is a problem most of our members are facing. Next slide, please. So as Heads Together, we have explored 3 different options that we can use to deliver our homes. So the first option being self-financed new build. Then the second option is the self-financed refurbishment. The third option, which is the partner-enabled new build. And for this particular presentation, we will be focusing on the third option, which is partnership with a housing association. And my colleague here, Stella, will take you through the third option just to explain what our expectations are and what we are willing to offer to bring this amazing opportunity and project to life. Thank you very much for listening to me. Stella will take us through.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stella. It will only be fair for me to introduce myself. Just like Lorraine, we work together as community asset-based community builders in Croydon, supporting development of different projects in Croydon. And I also have my background is in legal criminal justice, and also I run a community project that has been running for the past 4 years, supporting vulnerable people in the community, and we've supported over 2,000 families in the last 3 to 4 years. And as we go back to Heads Together, so our delivery today we'll be focusing on the third option. Okay, our proposal is to work with the housing association to deliver 15 social rented homes as a standalone site or part of the large development. Abby, we only need 15 houses to 20 by 2022. You have 600, so let's keep that in mind. To deliver these homes, the housing association would own the site in order to borrow and build. Partnership agreement ensures Heads Together, that is us, in representation in decision making, and to also access the community housing fund, prioritizing fixing affordability of your tenures. For long-term ownership and management, the housing association, that's you, retains ownership and acts as landlord and transferring the responsibility of managing the homes to us, that is Heads Together. On the finance and funding, the housing association finances the total development cost. The community housing fund is accessed through an agreement with us Heads Together, and the cost of bespoke elements such as the shared facilities may need to be raised by us, that's Heads Together. And how are we hoping to do this? As you can see, we already have a food hub, and also we're going to be able to fundraise, crowdfund, get some community grants from somewhere to be able to put it together to create a facility for all of us. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we talk about with our partnership, what are we going to benefit? Heads together, we're going to benefit from a housing association opportunity to provide 100% social rent for our members, and using your expertise, skills, and experience in delivering housing for our members. Now, you'd say, what are we going to give you? The benefit for you as a housing association is you will be able to access the community housing fund, that is the revenue and the capital. And we're experts and experience in well organizing ourselves and organizing them, looking after our properties. We'll manage them and make sure that we look after them in a suitable way, that is to taking care of the properties. And also, as we are very good in our community engagement, we will be able to enable build the community in our neighborhood, providing vital support activities. That will be, we can share our childcare facilities with the community. We can share our play places, maybe play area with the community around us as our neighbors. We can share the events that are going on in our neighbors, for example, the Queen celebration or whichever celebration that we want in the community. Everybody else. Okay, to our next slide. As then, if anyone doesn't have a question, we have 2 questions for you. What are the opportunities and the risks that you see in working with a group like Heads Together? That's the first question. And then the second question is, what advice do you have to help us build a relationship with the housing association as we are still young and growing? And for that, thank you very much. And we're hoping to work with you and give us an opportunity for only 15 houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. I'm immediately appointing you as my personal PR. Thank you. That was a fabulous sell. It's also we're perfectly on time, and you've led us beautifully back into the questions for the panel. So part of the idea for this session was that we've got some housing associations around the table and also some in the room, and just to start to explore those questions. So kind of what do we anticipate these partnerships could offer, both to the community-led housing group, but also to the housing association, who will also have an agenda full of busy things that they're trying to do, and kind of how do we get onto that agenda. So I wonder if I could open up to Abby first and then to Heather to just respond really to what you've heard about those 2 schemes, and maybe just to highlight things that have particularly struck you as things that would be appealing in terms of the story of your own organisation, but also any barriers that you might see to working with groups like these groups, not just these groups. Abby, over to you.
Thank you, Linda. Really 2 wonderful presentations there. The energy is really very visible, you know, and that's the good thing about community-led housing and co-ops. You've got a lot of energy. I can sense innovation and creativity. I can sense that you will not take no for an answer, which is really very good. They're really good ingredients to getting your own homes. We as housing associations, we've been around for a long time. We've been doing development for a long time. And sometimes we get into a rut because it's a daily bread and butter, really. We do this on a daily basis, and there's a lot of things that we take for granted. And you bring a lot of enthusiasm, you bring a lot of freshness, fresh eyes, you know, onto the table. And that is really good. It makes us connect with our roots from where we're coming from. And that is really vital. So thank you so much for both of you for presenting that. I think I like to be positive. I think there are opportunities, but with opportunities, we also have to be realistic. And there are probably some, you know, some things that some barriers there. For Sanya's projects, you've done a lot. You've actually got land, and you've got, it sounds like you've got yeah, you're almost there with the land. You've got professional expertise advising you, which is really good. You've been around since 2015, so you've got a bit of experience there. I'm assuming you've probably got a design brief. You're probably looking at the land and thinking of all the site investigations that you have to do. So you've come a long way, really. And what you want, my understanding of what you want at the moment is to partner with a housing association that can manage the properties on your behalf. So you're not actually asking for a housing association to buy those 3 units from you, that you're asking for a service to be provided, if I understand that. And I think there is opportunity for that. Even where L&Q cannot do that, we work with 43 partners. We're happily, signpost you to a number of housing associations who would be willing to work with yourselves. And Heather is actually one of our partners, SIHs. So that is really good. I think you're on the right path. With Heads Together, obviously you're still young, you've got a lot of passion, and I'm going to just encourage you to keep going with that. There are some kind of technical things that I think you probably need to learn, and that is how the finances work, the appraisals, the viability, where you're going to get land from. Land is so expensive in London, especially. That is a major thing that you need to consider. I would be happy to just sit down with yourselves, go through the process with you, the risk assessment, the risk management. Would be happy to do that. I'll hand you over to Heather.
Can I just say, we didn't mention that in 2019 we had the opportunity to submit a bid to Croydon Council. There was one land that was submitted, and it was put across to the community-led groups to bid for it. So unfortunately, we were not second, but on a good note, we became second place on that. And that was quite a great achievement for us because we started from scratch at that time. We're not incorporated. We were just fresh from scratch.
From the hood.
Yeah, and then at the moment, we are working closely with the community-led housing London Hub in terms of identifying properties. We have divided our groups into, we are looking for empty properties, and we are trying to identify land in Croydon as well. So we are, as you said, we are learning. And Croydon Council, if it wasn't because of this financial pressure that Croydon Council is going through, they were supposed to release another land in shrublands in January. And they were really encouraging us to prepare for that bid. So yeah, we've got a little bit of experience there in terms of working around the land, understanding what all this deliverability of viability is all about. So thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Heather, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I thought, again, as Abby said, the presentations from Sanya, Lorraine and Stella were excellent, and absolutely what came through was a passion and the mission to deliver affordable housing in London, which, let's face it, all organisations, regardless of size, are trying to do across the country. But I do think there is a passion and a mission that comes through more strongly if you're smaller. I'm just talking about my experience. Most of my housing experience has been in very large housing associations or in local authorities. And I mentioned earlier, I moved to Saphire about 4 years ago as a smaller association. And it is amazing, and I'm saying this because it is amazing how you can, or things can be viewed differently because you're small. And so some of the things I would say to my colleagues, Stella, Lorraine and Sanya, is there is something that we have as a society about size. And I would say it's about, it's practical, because there are issues about financial viability, and resources, but there's also something about people maybe not always taking you seriously. So that's something, to think about. You can work through that, but it's really good to forge alliances with other organisations of a similar size who are going through what you're going through. I think that's very important, and I would say that from Saphire's perspective as well. And it's funny to say, you initially, not embarrassed was not the right word, but people do in the sector talk about, well, how big is your organisation? How long have you been going? And I think we need to get away from that. in a way, which is why, you know, we're part of this group of smaller housing associations, as we say. And I would urge you in issue 1 to be reaching out to other organisations, other cooperatives, other CLTs who have a similar size, so you get strength from that network. Practically, I would also say don't underestimate, which I know you haven't, Sonia or Lorraine or Stella, how hard it is to develop. And I'm saying this because, again, Saphire, I mean, I've been involved in development before, but Saphire had developed for many years, and it was an existing organisation, and it's taken us about 4 or 5 years to actually get development off the ground. It is a long process. And in that process, you need to identify what you want to do, which, you know, you have as organisations, but you need to make sure you've got the expertise around you to do that. You need to really understand the market that you're operating in as well, and also, you know, the rules around it. So, and really being clear of your strategy. It's not an easy thing to do, and it does take some time. So really building the expertise and understanding the markets that you're operating in, I think, is key. In terms of partnership with housing associations, and I'm saying this again from my own experience, I think the link has got to be finding housing associations that share similar values to NW3 CLT and to Heads Together. That's the most important thing, one of the most important things you need to do. It's identifying those associations that you could potentially work with. There's lots of, you know, there are lots of housing associations out there, but we do have different missions and visions and values and cultures. And I think in any, let's face it, any business deal or any way of working, often it comes down to, can we really work with these people? Can we really trust them? That's absolutely key. So it really is about honing in on that. Specifically, Sanya, I would say to you, I mean, where I work is Saphire is actually based in Camden. We're in Kentish Town, and I think you're sort of Belsize Park, aren't you? I think for you, in terms of the 2 things you needed were accessing grant for affordable housing, it would be, I think, identifying perhaps a housing association. Like, it sounds like you already had discussions with one, but maybe identifying others who operate in that area. So there's a sense of allegiance or community already to that area. Because I mean, there's loads of housing associations, you could go to anyone, but I think in order for it to be meaningful, it probably is about identifying an association that works in the NW3 area, that has a mission or a vision or the cultural values that would be willing to, you know, help you access a grant for affordable housing and potentially manage the units. So I'd kind of hone it down to that potentially. And in terms of Heads Together, Stella and Lorraine, I would say, again, for you, again, it's about identifying, I know you've been talking to the local authority, and I actually live in Croydon, so I know what's going on. It's a very difficult time for local authority, so I don't know how much you're really going to get from them at the moment, given what's going on in Croydon. So again, I think it's about identifying associations that may have similar values to your own, or sort of, you know, tapped into that, and would be willing to talk to you about identifying sites, maybe sharing sites, you know, potentially. I haven't spoken to the chief executive, but as I said, I do actually chair CCHA that works in Croydon, and maybe after this, after offline, maybe what I should do is put you in contact with our CEO in Croydon, because we do see ourselves as a community-based association. So maybe there's a conversation that could be had about that. But I think generally it is about identifying like-minded organisations that NW3 and Heads Together could work with. And Linda, as I talk, because we're both active, and you're very active, Linda, in the smaller housing association, G320 as we call it, I just wonder if there's a way that we could bring the community-led housing movement together with some of the smaller associations, and maybe other associations, I mean L&Q as well, into some sort of forum where we can almost try and identify groups of people, organisations could actually work in partnership
Yeah, definitely. The equivalent of speed dating is what we had in mind. So we ran a G320 event about a year ago now to try and drum up some interest amongst housing associations for what community-led housing was about. And I wish we'd had all three of you at that event, really, because I think you really have brought passion to the table. And as Abby says, you can kind of forget it in your day job. It becomes the day job and you forget what it's all for. And one of the things that struck me most about what you said was that you have very, very, very specific kind of seeds for the passion that you now have, like really particular stories about your communities and your experience. But actually, you could translate those communities and those experiences anywhere in London, in most places across the UK. So the squeezed middle, the desire to bring our children up in a safe environment where the community is supportive to their well-being. Like these are themes that would echo for any landlord and for lots of people in communities everywhere. And somehow making that connection about scale. So if you think about the story that Abby told about the £2 for each member that's turned into a £10 billion organisation with 100,000 homes, although it feels small and these things feel very particular at the moment, I do think they're tapping into something very human, and that those stories will travel really well. And stories was a word I double underlined, sort of saying, like, actually stories is what this movement's built on, and we need to be more proud, more loud about those stories and share them across any audience that we can to try and get people to the table. So I think a kind of speed dating event where we try and match values, match stories, match interests, I think would be really exciting. We can certainly have that as a takeaway from this event. Rowan, I wondered if we might invite Sanya and Stella and Lorraine to kind of respond to any of the points from the panel, and then we will open things up to the rest of the audience for questions and comments. I know they're starting to come in. Stella and Lorraine first, did you want to respond to any of the points from Abby and Heather?
Yes, I just want to say thank you very much for your advice, for your encouragement as well. It doesn't sound patronizing at all. You know, it shows that, you know, you have got that passion to help us as well. So we're looking forward to it. As we said, you know, we can have the desire to do whatever we want to do, build homes and stuff like that. If the passion is not there, it's just not going to happen. As we said, we're really frustrated by our living conditions. So we are prepared to do whatever it takes, you know, to support ourselves, no matter how difficult it is. It's been really difficult to be on this journey, just to even come to where we are right now as Heads Together, working full time as a single parent. But my passion is just driving me to keep going. That's why I'm sitting here today, trying to convince you to say, give us the opportunity, let's work together, let's do it. Thank you very much.
So
thank you. Can I just say something? Sorry, Sanya. Thank you very much. I feel more encouraged and feel more passionate. One thing I want us to all remember is that unless we help the young ones to grow, we can never have a good society. So give a push to the young ones. And I'm not just talking about Heads Together, but meaning Heads Together as well. Give them a push, and you see other people grow as well to make a difference in the community. And thank you very much, LMQ, and thank you, Heather, as well. And I'm looking forward to learning more from you guys as well. And our members are willing to learn and have more experience from whichever direction we can get to be able to make this a success. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. Sanya, did you want to come in?
Yes, I didn't reflect on how we got to 2018. It's not like we did nothing from 2015. And what Lorraine said is we were unsuccessful at least once in pitching for a council property right at the beginning, a bit like you. You know, that what spurred us into existence was the property that was going from the council, and we didn't know anything about being organized or being incorporated or anything, and somebody, I don't even remember how, somebody mentioned the CLT. The property was going in our backyard, and we thought we don't want more buy to leave which is what happens in our kind of neighborhood. And we wanted to see if we can put together the proposal, and we did, and and this was before we were incorporated. We just had a membership of the National CLT Network. Anyway, that was a no, and we learned from that and from a couple more that we tried that we actually need to go out and find the money, not just value, social value, which is what we were trying to convince the council was worth investing in. Going back to, money, which underpins it all, viability tool is probably the most valuable tool that we've developed through the help of the CLH, that got us together understanding where we find the money, and cross-subsidizing works for us because it's a high value area, but really it only mops up very little. A lot of money needed for the development comes from grants, which is why we're looking for a partner. And when Heather said, search for sharing same value and locality, that is exactly where we started. And initial response was absolutely, we thought we were a match made in heaven, until it went up the chain in the housing association, or rather a group of the association, which just said, well, no, we can't really. We're happy to mentor, which is all lovely, but it doesn't build the building. It doesn't build the site. But I think that the reason why we are around and we are passionate and we are inventive or whatever is because we are really in tune with the granular locality. We walk past these sites, we see people coming and going, we see the neighborhood eroding, we see our people, traveling from South London for an hour because that's where they can only afford to live in order to be nurses. We have Royal Free Hospital, employs 5,000 members of staff. Nobody can live anywhere near NW3 or indeed where the hospital is. Or teachers, we have 57 schools in our locality. No teacher, be it private or state school, can afford to live anywhere near. Anyway, so we know, we breathe the everyday, and we know that we should get together because we're not heard, and this is why we're reaching out to both the council, who once upon a time did provide for a much broader affordable level of affordability, or indeed to housing associations who came in to fill that gap once the council kind of couldn't cope anymore. And now somewhat you guys have grown beyond and become really efficient and really good, but actually the people on the ground are losing touch, and nobody's hearing them, we think, and that's where we come in. So I think it's this kind of learning from the older and the more experienced, picking up what you do well and perhaps where you could improve, but where we step in, not necessarily you need to improve, but we bring in that you may have lost in a way. So yes, the speed dating would be brilliant. I mean, we did a bit of research, but we can, and we found some, in fact 2 so far, so one was better than the other, but more would be even better. And council, the noises that they're making is that we're going to be a partner and the councils, as we know, have a lot of small sites and have no capacity to develop them. They can't borrow anymore. They don't want to be put in yet more debt. Anyway, enough said. But I think we do it, out of hours. We do it because we feel we need to step out, and I think it's different when it is a full-time job, which is why we employ people to do the full-time job for us in a way, and we provide the passion and the steering and the voice.
Thank you, Sanya. I think there's an interesting theme for us to think about, which is what happened when it went up the line. So what was it that changed? Because that's the barrier that we probably most need to understand. Is what is it that people are anxious about that stops them moving forward? Because I think it's difficult to imagine that people wouldn't want to be part of any of these stories. But something, risk or reputation or complexity or a fear of something is pulling people away. So I think that would be interesting for us to think about. I was going to ask Rowan to open up the floor to some of the questions that have been coming in on the Q&A.
Certainly. There's been a couple of questions around the kind of practicalities of accessing grant and the relationship with housing associations and councils, which maybe we can kind of come to at the end. I think they're more kind of pragmatic questions. We had a question from Andy Lloyd from Leeds Community Homes about the different kind of partnership models, and I see from the chat that he's also working to helping community groups to select housing association partners at the moment. So I'm actually going to invite him to ask his question. I'll invite you to talk, Andy, if you are able to do that, rather than asking you to kind of turn your camera on. But if you are there, do ask your question, and perhaps share, if you could maybe share some of your experiences for kind of how that process of finding housing association partners for the groups that you're working with. That would be really valuable. Are you there? If not, I will ask the question on your behalf.
Hi, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, so I've got a bit of experience working with housing associations and community groups. Some of the community groups I've worked with have chosen to go it alone and done their own developments and actually done really well. But I think for many groups, it's a bit daunting. Obviously, it's a huge process. So some of the partnership options are quite interesting. The two common ones which I've come across would be development leases, where the community negotiates what happens on the site through the lease, and then the housing association takes on the risk and responsibility of developing, but also manages the scheme for a long period of time afterwards. And the other is the consortium model, where a housing association can provide a development service to a community group which would need to become a registered provider, but it lightens the load of the complex business of actual development. And the community group then owns and runs the scheme as a registered provider, or it could contract out the housing management if it wanted to. So these options, they do involve compromise, because it's really good what you were saying about picking housing association partners that share your values. So what we tend to do is draw up a prospectus which provides context, explains what community-led housing is, and describes the vision of that particular community group and what it's hoping to find in a partnership. And then that provides a starting point for discussions, and it would be sent to the top management of the housing association to avoid any kind of confusion or disappointment, so that we, if they're not interested, we find out fairly quickly. And that seems to be quite a good way of approaching it. So it's really just asking the question of whether or not people have come across those partnership models at all, or any other models which might be of interest.
I think maybe that question for me kind of separates into two parts. There's the kind of delivery side partnership, and there's the kind of long-term management partnership. And I might maybe kind of feed that back to you, Linda, for the long-term management, and maybe Abby, and in terms of the delivery side, how the process you're kind of working through, I know with LOG and through Build London Partnership. works. Because I'm just bringing in another question here, which is that from Peter Burke, who says they're kind of part of a group, and all that they don't have is an RP partner. But even with those shared values, finding it a struggle to kind of progress that conversation. So that the question there is, what do RPs need from us and need from groups in order to kind of to get that process kind of moving along? And I think to me it kind of falls into kind of those two categories of the delivery side and also the management side, because some groups might want one or the other or both.
Yeah, I wonder if we can tap into Abby's experience of development more widely as well. As what would make you say no is almost the question that's in my mind, rather than what would make you say yes.
Okay, thanks. We generally just look at it on a case-by-case basis, or we are governed by the GLA grants. So there are conditions to those grants, and we managed to negotiate quite a very high grant on behalf of our partners. In fact, some people think it's one of the highest grants in the whole of London at the moment. And with that grant comes conditions that we have to we're obligated to follow, basically, and we can't really transfer that grant. So what we do is we work with our partners. There was an old model which we no longer use now, which was the first model when we first started 2 years ago. We were willing to take the risk. We had 100 million pots of fund as a kind of recycling capital for our partners who didn't have the money. We would build on their behalf, and then we will sell to them at costs at the end. That was going well until we had to pause on our development kind of program due to all the issues that we're having at the moment. The thing with big organizations is that we've got really big issues as well, big problems. And so the Grenfell Tower and the problems with fire safety and cladding, and then we had COVID, we just had to kind of pause a bit and take account of where we were going to. So that old model doesn't exist anymore. The £100 million that was ring-fenced got taken kind of in-house. So what we now do is the model now is that our partners actually forward fund. So we would help them, or if they do need their assistance, we would signpost or advise or share our experience as to how they can raise money. And some of them can do that through charging. Some of them have actually got the reserves. We would, talk to their financial director, help them that way. They would forward fund. And so different organizations would, do differently. Some would say, and just before I come to that, there is the issue of the grants as well. So there are 3 ways in which you can actually claim the grant from the GLA with the contract that we have with them. So we can either have access so that the title of the land is in L&Q's name. That gives us something called secure by legal interest. So basically the GLA is just really comfortable with us to say that we're not going to run away. We've got a good relationship with L&Q. We know what you do. We're happy with that. And what that allows us to do is claim the grants once we start to build on sites, and they would give us 100% of that grant as opposed to 50 at the beginning and 50 at the end. The other option is that we could get a 250-year lease, say, or 125-year lease. So if the land was in your ownership, you would give us a lease, long-term lease, so that we can get that, we can meet that obligation of secure legal interest. And again, we can claim the grant at start on site, which helps the cash flow for a lot of our partners. And then the third option is the fact that, if the boards, if your boards or your committees are not happy with, why should L&Q have the title? This, what if they run away with it? What if, and all this kind of stuff, which is quite, valid points. You won't be able to claim the grant at start on site. You'll be able to claim the grant at the end at PC. So basically the disadvantage of that is that you cannot use the grant to try and cash flow your project, which means you have to look for the funding. So in terms of the in terms of the partnership, we've used both really. We've used one where we've said, okay, we're going to take all the risks. We're going to help you out here. you only pay at cost. So this is not for profit, it's part of our corporate social responsibility. We do charge a fee per unit, but that's really to pay like our salaries, because I've got a team of 10, 11 at the moment. But we don't, there's no return on investment, there is no internal rate of return. We're not trying to make a profit out of this so that we can then plow the surplus back into our homes. That's not what this is about at all. So we have done that. And there's some schemes that still fall within that model before the cutoff point of last year. I think it was October. The new model is that we would just try and help you as much as we can for you to get your own funding. And then it's about value for money. It's about using all the experience that we've got, for instance, using our ERs, using our spec, using our tech specs to develop your own design brief. Things that you would have to pay for money, you would have to pay consultants money to get all those documents, we would do for you free of charge. If there were issues, we've got, like I said before, we've got 250 kind of staff, back office support, all experts in their own field that we can bring in to give you advice, to have a workshop to take you through what the issues are. Again, if you had to pay for this, if you had to engage consultants, you would use money. Framework, you have access to our framework. Normally, if people want to use our organizations want to use our framework, they would have to pay for it. If you're a partner, you get that for free. So our consultants framework, our contractor framework, fire safety or fire, strategies, consultant framework, all those are free to our partners. So there's a lot of freebies that we give just really to help, and the development capacity as well, because it's not just, it's like teaching our partners how to fish, so that they can then start to do that on their own in future. It's not about helping them to do everything, then they haven't got an idea how it happens, it just happens and then they pay. So we've had experience of both, kind of the consortium that Andy mentioned, and also, the partnership that, takes all the risk. But again, I'm aware that there are other groups out there that do different things. So there is a North River Alliance, for instance, been around for ages. They work with housing associations in the north of London. There is Gateway Housing Association, helps, smalls. There are other kind of partnerships outside of London that do things differently. Some of them make a profit, some of them don't. So, it just depends on how they were set up and what the mission of it is. We don't tend to make a profit. We feel that it's the right thing to do. We've got a target of 10,000 homes a year for the next 10 years. And we tend to, through effectiveness and efficiency, we tend to standardize our program. That's the way we can make it work. That's the way we can scale up. That's the way we can make that speed work. However, we're also conscious of the fact that there are local communities who are really deep-rooted into their communities who, we want to support. We want to go back to our roots and, through those links, make sure we're helping and assisting those groups. And that's why we're doing this. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, really. So, yeah, those are my experiences with those kind of models.
Brilliant, thank you, Abby. Heather, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add either about that or about long-term management partnerships and what opportunities you see there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of really good practical stuff from Andy and Abby in terms of how to do this. I was struck by just thinking about what are, comments about culture and working together, and some things have just come up for me about that. In terms of where we are now, we're in a pandemic, and I think the housing white paper is about to be released today by the government, which is long awaited. So I do think at the moment there is, I think if we just take it strategically, there is huge housing need in this country. There's just no doubt about it. There's a huge need for affordable housing, which I think, even the government accepts, although it probably has a slightly different view of how to meet that need than perhaps I might do. But there is huge housing need. And that housing need has to be met. Everybody's got, the way I look at it, everybody's got to pull their weight, if they're concerned about that, in meeting it. So I think doing housing differently is part of this wider housing movement, or movement that is trying to meet this huge housing need. And that movement includes very, very large associations like L&Q, local authorities, smaller associations like myself, and community land trusts like Sanya's, and Heads Together like Stella and Lorraine. We're all part of this big movement, and I think that's one way of looking at it. So if everybody's got to play their part in that, it's about thinking, well, what exactly is the role that my particular organisation is playing? So that's one of the things I think we should sort of, in terms of framing this, we should be thinking about, just linking it into the broader housing affordable needs strategy that's desperately needed in this country. The other thing in terms of making links and the culture of housing associations, as Abby says, housing associations have a number of difficulties at the moment. That's the reality. We are quite stretched. A number of things have happened. I mean, Grenfell is absolutely huge for many associations, and most of us have had to divert attention away from maybe building or Formula Lights, partly as a result of that. So that's happening. Because of the funding model in housing associations, the way that affordable housing is now getting funded, because grant has gone down. I started in housing when social housing grant was, I think, about 50% or 75%, and it was 100% at one stage for supported housing. Grant per property now is 20%. It's really small. So you've got to think to yourself, how does the rest of that 80% get funded? And it gets funded by associations having to borrow. That's the only way it's going to get funded. And that brings all sorts of other demands on associations in terms of if they've got to go for borrowing, how they fund it, meeting lenders' requirements, making sure the regulators' requirements are met. It therefore means that you have to have a certain type of person on your board if you're going to convince the regulator and lenders to make sure that you're a reliant, competent organisation. So what I mean is that those commercial pressures can sometimes push housing associations. They're still doing the day job. You know, housing associations, when we talk about mission, housing associations by and large are absolutely still committed to their mission of affordable housing. They absolutely are, and to their communities. But what's happened is they've got these other pressures. And I'm saying this so that when, Sanya, you talk to a housing association, maybe at middle management or senior management level, and it sounds great, but it might get to the board, it could be because that association is feeling we've got a lot on the moment, we don't have the capacity to help the smaller movement. So I think practically, I think in a ways, how can we do that? How can we get associations to see there's something in this for them? It's clear what it's for. It could be for, you know, NW3CLT and Heads Together, but what's in it for associations, given the pressures I've said? And I think it's got to be to tap into that broader strategic aim. And it's got to be to tap into, and some associations are actually saying, you know, the community. So really, and that's why I'm going back to the vision and the values. It's about trying to tap into that bit of associations that, despite all the pressures, we still need to make sure that we're meeting our mission. We're still trying to tap into this wider strategic aim of meeting affordable needs. So it's kind of meeting them at that level, I think, is the other way. The other way as well, it's kind of a negative way to look at it, but housing associations have been criticised for losing their purpose and mission. And some of us are quite sensitive about that criticism and want to find ways of showing to the world that we're absolutely not. And, you know, I wouldn't be, if I were you, I wouldn't be afraid to use that as a way of trying to engage with some associations and saying, not saying it by any means that you've forgotten your mission, but, you know, this is part of your CSR. This is part of your corporate social responsibility to be helping smaller organisations like ours to get off the ground. So I think it's about being aware maybe of some of the pressures that associations have got and how you can maybe find a way in to appeal to them, a bit as Andy said, almost a brochure that appeals to that. I think I do think there's a lot happening, and there's some connections could be where we talk about speed dating. The association that I chair is part of the Place Shapers housing group, and Place Shaper housing associations are concerned about communities. They pride themselves on being part of neighbourhoods. Again, maybe even tapping into those, the Place Shaper group, and thinking about, again, what linkages could be made, because those associations are saying we are community based. So just some initial thoughts, and I'll stop there.
Thanks, Heather. That's great. I think, Rowan, do you think you've got time for your one more question?
Maybe a quick one. So there are a couple of questions from Michelle Scott, kind of around the access to the grant. It's asking the question, when local authorities are disposing of land, is there any reason why they cannot claim on behalf of CLTs? And just to answer that directly, but it leads on to a question around control, I think, is that the claimant of the community housing grant, or for capital grant for social housing, needs to be the direct landlord. So it could be the local authority, but they have to then be the landlord of those homes. And to kind of find out more about that, I'd encourage you to come to our session this afternoon on council housing. But I think that raises a question around what's at risk from the communities in terms of control, when there's a need for how to work with RPs to kind of be a landlord to social rented homes. I'm interested to know kind of what scope for negotiation with a managing RP, with a landlord RP, is there in terms of control of those homes? Is it something that that community groups could be looking to negotiate on?
Yeah, I think in some ways I feel like we're well placed to talk about being a landlord, and anyone who knows me knows I'm obsessed about people not becoming an RP because they want to develop a property, but because they want to be a landlord, because that's really when it starts. You know, the development takes all of the energy, and I often get a bit frustrated about that, because really the real work starts when you've got tenants in your properties or shared owners in your properties, and you're responsible for their well-being and their safety. And you have to protect those assets in the long term to keep doing that work forever. You know, once you're in there, it's like having a child, you're sort of in it, and you have to think about the long term. And I definitely think it shifts your thinking when you start to think about the long term. But in reality, that for me is where some of the best partnerships can arise, because you can also have a huge amount of control over all of those processes and really feed off the expertise and knowledge of the housing association as a landlord, who knows some of the pitfalls that will come later and can help you build in early on things that will make it an easier journey. So in the relationships we have with about 35 co-ops, it's a menu-based kind of management service. So people take what they want, from the whole service to very, very little of the service, from, you know, day-to-day repairs and maintenance to running the whole finance side. And people do that based on where they are in their journey. So a lot of you have talked about building skills over time, and I think that management process is very well suited to that. So yeah, I think it is a very flexible part. Sorry, Sonia, I could see you wanted
Yes,
to...
I just wanted to, I don't know why I didn't word it before, but the conundrum, another conundrum we have is the ownership in perpetuity, which is the theme for Community Land Trust, and that kind of doesn't fit neatly with the housing association taking either 250 years lease. I know perpetuity is longer than 250 years, but nonetheless, it feels it's very close to it. Nor, in fact, the other option was, I think the Abby mentioned, is being on having a title on the lease. Again, it doesn't square with the symbol of what community land trust means, and part of it is the fear of community land trusts falling under the voluntary right to buy, which at the moment the trusts are exempt from, and we're hoping are going to remain, whereas the housing associations are not. So that's where the kind of awkwardness of the partnership, in particular in accessing the grants, lies in, we feel.
Yeah, I think there are definitely sorry, Abby, after you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to clarify that, Sonia. The lease or us being on the title is not for infinity. It's to claim the grants. So we do relinquish that. We surrender that once the properties have been built. We would surrender that back to the landowners. But GLA won't be able to transfer the grant to you, my understanding of it, if you're not an RP. And that is where we then work with yourselves to try and get a smaller housing association to kind of partner with yourselves to look after, especially if you've got social rented properties, affordable homes, and that kind of stuff, really. So the lease or the title is not in perpetuity. It's just for us to be able to build on your land and to give GLA that security that their grant is not going to be misused. But the obligation of that grant will then fall onto you once we've transferred these properties to you. Does that make sense?
I think we're running very short on time. All the interesting stuff always happens in the last 15 minutes on these calls. I feel like there's lots of kind of delving into specific questions that might be worthwhile to do in another kind of less kind of public session, and we'd be happy to organise that. Rowan, I had a few observations, kind of just general things from this session, really. I mean, one was just the kind of the passion and creativity and innovation and energy that came from those two presentations and how that was felt by everyone. Linked to the kind of opening comments from Abby and Heather about where housing associations started. And I do think that should kind of just make us brave about this sector and what's possible, because all things start small, and it's hard to look back and remember that. But I mean, L&Q is a particularly good example of something that kind of skyrocketed, and there's no reason to think we can't do that. I think the other thing that came through really strongly is development is really hard, and that the best that we can do for each other is actually to be generous about each other's skills and to really think about using horses for courses, like what will help us to most easily navigate this really difficult bit of the process, because all the good stuff happens the other side of getting to the end of your development process. So how can we make that as easy a transition as possible and not allow it to become a stumbling block? And everything that you said about partnerships, really, so the need to really understand and respect each other between the housing association and the groups, that really is a two-way dialogue. It's not a kind of confrontation. It's something that actually is the beginning, hopefully, of a long-term relationship. And that means taking some time to really understand the challenges, the kind of challenges that existing landlords are facing are the kind of challenges you will also face in 10 years' time if you're successful. So there's a real value in digging into that now. And that, I think, will help us to find solutions more quickly. So those were my takeaways, along with a bit of speed dating, which sounds like the best job I've had in quite a long time. Rowan, over to you to see us out.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Linda for excellent chairing, to all of our panelists for such a kind of valuable discussion. This has been, we're now halfway through our series of events. We have another one this afternoon on resident empowered council housing. Tomorrow morning, we have a session on the role of developers in the private sector in enabling community-led housing, and tomorrow afternoon on cooperatives. Another shout out to Aaron, our man behind the curtain, for doing all the technical work. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's it from us. We will be sharing this video online on our YouTube channel, and if you want to carry on with any of the conversations, then do get in touch. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you,
all.
everyone.